Hello, everyone. Welcome to Facebook Live Core Experience. We're going to be talking about Nobleman today, but more specifically around why men's work needs women. And so before we dive in, I just wanted to let you know that this is going to be a super fun, super informative conversation where we really talk about first of all, just the fact that there's change possible, that we can have change happen, like that there's things that we're struggling with and we can make a difference, like something different is possible from that. And the other thing is we're going to really talk about the distinction of men's work led by men and men's work led by women. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And also really wanting to share about real life examples. Like Adam has lived it. He's lived both. He's lived the men's work world led by men, and he's, oh, hi, Freedom. And he's done the men's work led by women, which is our specialty at Core. So we'll definitely be talking about that some more. So we're really excited to have you here and dive into this really fun, informative topic. And I also just want to thank Adam for being willing to share his story, share his experience, so that hopefully you will get something out of that, relate to it in some way, and be spurred to take whatever next step feels right for you. So let's jump in. What qualifies us to talk about why men's work needs women? So I will first let Adam introduce himself, just a little bit about you and the mini version of your story, and then we'll obviously dive in. No pressure, no pressure.
So hi, my name's Adam. I am 44. I'm a lawyer by training. Grew up in the East Coast in Boston originally. Lived in California now for about 10 years. And yeah, I did a lot of work in the last couple of years. Some transformational weekends and personal growth, and just sort of went down that path after really feeling that some change was needed a couple of years ago. So that brings me here.
Beautiful. And so my name is Natalie Vartanian. I've been doing personal development work for myself for, almost 13 years now. And it was one of those, I felt like I needed something different and had started a new job. And so it was like this, come join this leadership training, and it was like life reboot, which was wonderful because that is how I became an amazing leader, by rebooting my life. And then about 5 years ago, I got involved with Core because I've been doing both coaching and facilitating my own workshops, and then also was at a point when I really could use some relationship support. And so that was how I got in with Core, and then it was just so unique, the work. So I kind of have stayed for 5 years now. Can't get rid of me that easy, Core. So, and I've also worked with a lot of men that have done men's work too. Like I love the idea of us getting the support that we need and creating the kind of change that we want. And so I'm very passionate about this topic, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it today.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
And so it's January now. I was realizing I went and sat with a men's group last week, and realized it was just a year ago was actually the first time that I went and sat with the men's group. There was an article in the New York Times last year, right about this time, that came out about sort of the resurgence of men's work and men's groups. Wow. And they had a couple of different ones listed, and it just sort of popped out to me. There's a really interesting sort of old school men's workbook called Iron John.
Oh my God, I just heard of that recently. I want to read it.
It was written by Robert Bly in the 80s, and it was all about sort of the archetypal forms of man, the masculine consciousness, and growing from a boy consciousness to a man consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's a little dated, but it sort of spurred a lot of men's work in the early 80s. And actually there was a group called the Mankind Project that I reached out to last year about this time just to check out a group, just to sit with them on a Monday night and just talk about what's happened in people's lives. And after I went to one night with them, I signed up for their weekend training the next day because it was just really normal guys, some tech people, some non-tech people, old, young, just a whole range of people and of men just sharing what was going on. And it felt like a really safe, connected, and these guys were really just beautiful guys. Like I knew that if there was a training that these men recommended, I wanted to be part of it. So I signed up for the training the next day and went about a month later. So this is all just in the past year for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, so we're like hitting
I've been on the Express
time.
course in the last year. So if you're talking about change and hitting that kind of reset button, it's possible. And now it feels like a short period of time, but this past year felt very long at other times.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good segue to talk about, if you could paint a picture of where you were before you started the work. I know you were kind of mentioned there was something calling, and obviously like reading this article, but if you could paint a picture of what was happening for you and both the kind of successes and the struggles in your life.
Yeah, sure. So, I can point to a sort of before and after moment in my life, and that was September 1st, 2016. It was a really busy time with work. I do corporate law by trade, and it's a really busy profession. It's very easy to just sort of distract with work and just go into that. And so I was busy all the time, stressed and busy all the time, and in relationships, but not really in them for a whole bunch of different reasons. And finally, after the sort of latest in a string of relationships, it just hadn't worked. We broke up that night, and I just had this feeling like I just can't do this anymore. And it just kept coming up to me. And I sort of took a little pause and worked on sort of de-stressing was maybe the first thing, was calming the nervous system a bit. And I found things like yin yoga and more just sort of body-based kind of things. And actually, yin yoga is a great way to tap in if anybody out there is interested in it. Great way to sort of feel connected to and safe in your body. And I did that for a while. I did some breath work with some friends, and it's all sort of starting to open a little more of the connection to what was happening underneath.
So kind of like instead of being in the anxiety mind, you're like, okay, what's really happening in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in 2018, I got into a new relationship, feeling that I was now a little more heart open and really was not ready for what transpired there. And it was a really tough relationship. There was just a lot of disconnection and suffering in the name of love. And so a lot of things shifted this past year. And we can go into that a little later. But
I mean, and what were you thinking at that time about women or relationships? I'm curious, like as you're kind of like talking about this suffering through this, like, or unnecessary suffering, it feels like in your relationship.
I think what I was feeling at the time, I sort of started to more open to the concept of love. And that sounds sort of silly, but I was trying. I was maybe for the first time ever like trying to actually form a good relationship. And so I thought that because we had love, that meant that anything that came with that was okay. And that sort of goes into my family past. There's a lot of love and suffering being confused. And after a little while of just really trying to fix problems that just weren't going to be fixed, we ended up breaking up. And then we got into this sort of repetitive pattern of breaking up and getting back together and just piling on and feeling of, but if we love each other, we should be able to work it out. And that's not always true. That was sort of my lesson, is that sometimes you have to know when you tried hard enough and walk away.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also getting just like the empathy around, and when we don't know that there could be different in that place, right? Or that there are just patterns, right? Like there are things you've always done, and of course we're going to always do them because we've always done them. Like there's nothing to course correct our behavior,
Absolutely.
And so it's really poignant for me because I've definitely had that same story around but we love each other so much. I don't understand,
Yeah.
and but we're two people with our own blueprints from our own past and our own beliefs around love and our own and not even when it comes to romantic relationship, but even just, with my guy friends or with my family members, but just like that place where you just get stuck in a loop and you're like, why can't I get out of this freaking loop?
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back now, realizing what I brought to that relationship was a lot of continual patterns. And I hadn't really, I'd started looking in, I'd done some therapy and some breath work. It was all sort of ramping up at the same time as I was in this relationship. I hadn't really been looking at relationship patterns and really doing a deep dive into old family patterns in my relationship with my father and mother and even sister, a lot of which I actually really discovered at Natalie. And I know it sounds corny and it's a little bit of a pitch, but it really opened some things up for me that I hadn't even thought of, didn't have access to.
Yeah. And don't worry, we're actually going to pitch you all because you really should do normal men. I'm like, I'll be the brazen one that's like, I've seen a lot of men go through this, and I want to just kind of, again, untangle why.
Yeah.
And we'll get into and why the presence of women is so important, in this kind of conversation. So thank you for painting the picture of where you were and kind of where you were pre doing the work. And so, let's fast forward now. You went to your first men's circle.
Yeah.
So this supportive environment, and then you're like, I want what these guys are having.
Yeah.
And you went to MKP.
Yeah.
So they have a weekend training. So Mankind Project does these weekend men's retreats that are led by women. So only men attend, right? And men's
That's
staff.
right. It's called the New Warrior Training Adventure, the NWTA weekend. And it's just a 48-hour journey. It sort of mimics or captures parts of what they call the hero's journey, sort of the classical archetypal journey. And they work a lot with
it's another book.
Yeah, it's similar. It's all similar, but I think in a different approach. It's very masculine container, very strong, and it's open to all ranges of men. It's not just focused on typical masculinity. It's just sort of that part. And yeah, there's some really skilled men doing work there with all sorts of different aspects of the masculine side.
And so what opened up for you at that weekend? So you're now at a weekend, all men, you found yourself here. I'm curious what both you kind of were faced with and what opened up for you there.
Well, it's interesting. I went in a little guarded actually at the Mankind Project weekends. I have sort of a distrust of large groups of men. My family is very religious, and so I have this image of the rabbis, these sort of all-knowing, all-wise kind of men that were pretty hurtful, I thought, when I was younger, and just not trusting anybody who claims to speak with, or men who claim to speak with knowledge of higher power. That's sort of a trigger for me. So,
got it.
So being on a weekend,
so you're like this, basically.
Yeah,
you're first.
A little closed for myself, but really seeing some other guys go through some amazing openings there, and so almost learning by watching a little bit more of what other people were experiencing.
Yeah.
And then I had an opening to trust that weekend. It was pretty powerful. But some of the work that I personally did that they pulled out of me was really about trust. And so it was cool to have that with other men and feel a little more trust at the end of that weekend.
Right. And just so you all know, CORE, the organization that I'm within, we're talking about, and on the Facebook page of right now, we are partnered with Mankind Project because their work is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so the flip side of the coin, and the thing that
it's how I found CORE. Through Mankind Project website.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. And the thing that I really love about it is their tagline is creating a safer world by creating safer men.
Yeah.
And there's just something about that is so touching because, it is a big game that they're playing. Really wanting safety for all, and for men to find a sense of like themselves,
Yeah.
you know, in a way is kind of what I gather.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've staffed a weekend for them.
oh, okay.
And I think they're a great organization. They are. They're also very large. Like they are their weekends are large productions. And not to put that down at all, but it is a little less intimate than I think the core weekend was. So I like the intimacy of the core. It was just a little easier to drop in smaller circles, a little more time. We'll get to comparing the two, I guess.
We will totally. Yeah, and that definitely is a different energy that they're going for, and I think this is what I've realized too, the value of, you know, not everything works for everyone, and so to have at least the plethora of options to be able to.
I was so happy. I sort of did a survey of the masculine growth kind of world this year.
Right.
And happy that I saw both.
Yeah.
They both have reasons why you might be called to one or the other, or why they're complementary.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So then, let's talk about, so that's even cool to realize. So you heard about CORE on the website, and then, but what drew you to want to do Nobleman? Like, what was the pull there?
Well, so after I came back from the Mankind Project weekend end of last February, my girlfriend and I broke up at that time. I was sort of having a hard time, sort of hit a little bottom point. Personally, at the same time I was going through this breakup, I had like a sewer leak in my apartment.
Oh, it was
like
all literally
went to hell, went to shit at the same time. And I was, to be honest, I was just looking for like to be with people for a weekend. I was just hurting and sad, and I was just looking around for something else to do for the weekend. And I was like, what does MKP suggest? And looking at their website, and saw Nobleman, and I looked on the Nobleman website actually, and I recognized another man from one of a men's group that I was sitting with. And he had also, Adam Morrison actually.
Ah, yes.
And he had done a testimonial, and I was like, oh, I know him. And I called him, and he said it would be an exceptional experience, and I should treat myself. And I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't really know what I was getting into, honestly. Like it's a little hard to explain the process. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just hard to, even now, it's hard to describe to somebody what it's like. But maybe it was better going in with just more open.
Knowing
what was going to happen.
Yeah, I'll definitely speak to those of you that have a need to know. For the most part, that's not helpful. However, there is, I think, especially when we talk about safety, right?
Yeah.
Like there has to be, I think, a place in you that feels comfortable enough or safe enough to go into something that's unknown, like a weekend like this. You know, obviously there's so much unknown and there's so much mystery to a weekend, just because you won't know what's going to come up for you until you do it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be such a unique experience for you, because I could do 500 jumping jacks and have a totally different outcome than you doing 500 jumping jacks. You know, it just that way that our bodies react differently and our minds react differently and our hearts, and like your background going into this situation versus me with my background, like going into that situation. And so, you know, we're definitely available for calls if anyone wants to know more. And there is a lot that is better left to the mystery, because it's probably going to be way better than you think it's going to be. And so I do want to kind of now talk about, so you're now at Nobleman. And
well, there's sort of this part of the grasping mind that just wants to know everything that's going to happen.
Yes. Well, how did you deal with that? I mean, was your brain going off?
I was in a pretty low place, and my brain was shut off, which was sort of nice. It was just like, there's going to be people here. I know this guy who said it would be great. And I'm just going to trust that. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to, I need something right now, and I was looking.
Yes.
And so maybe that's also a good time if you're looking, if there's something that you're just shooting for, because it can be a lot of different things to different people, like you said. Mm-hmm. And I went in looking for something, and I got that thing.
Yeah. So then I'm curious, again, kind of going back to the Nobleman experience, what opened up there? Like what was, I know you mentioned a little bit about the challenge going in was around feeling like life just kind of went to shit. and and just feeling lonely and wanting kind of connection and an answer. I'm curious if there was anything else before you started diving in to see what was going to open up for you.
During the weekend, before,
or even just maybe the first day. I mean,
yeah, it was a wild weekend. So I drove down with Ben,
okay.
a guy I just met then, and we spent a couple hours in the car talking. He's a really good friend now. Like just almost the anticipation and the drive down. We were both just, our brains were humming what's going to happen, and both of us just sharing. Two of us in a car for a couple hours. I'd never met the guy before,
right.
But he was in a similar place and thinking about similar things. And what a cool thing just to make a new friend at this point in life.
Right.
And that's not something to downplay. I think for a lot, I'm 44. I don't have too many. Actually, this year I made a ton of new connections, and just the world sort of reopened in a way that I think is hard for people. You have your high school friends, your college friends, your professional friends, but it's hard to really drop deep maybe with some older people or some people from farther back, and it's nice to sort of shake it up a little bit. So just meeting new people who are also interested in that same kind of thing was powerful.
Right, to just be in a circle of guys now. Yeah, and what was that like to now you experience a circle of men kind of being men and talking about just themselves and their lives, but now you're sitting in a circle with men talking about women.
Talking about or in front of or
both?
Yeah.
Right. Let's paint you the picture, everyone. So at Noble Man, you are a male participant.
Yeah.
And sitting in circle, and then there's
3
women
days.
For 3 days.
3 days.
For 3 days. And there are women sitting on the outside of the circle staffing, and they're there solely to support the men. They've done their own work. They've done Poor Woman, so that's the intro workshop for women, all women. And so now they're here. And so these beautiful, courageous men are sitting in a circle with women at the front because they are also leading this weekend. Facilitating the weekend and staffing. So now you're sitting in a circle with men, with women around you, and being asked to talk about your relationship with them.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny, I'll go back a little because my guy friends in the last 20, 30 years have been, I play a lot of sports. I went to college and I went to law school, and everybody was very professionally focused. We talked about what we're achieving, accomplishing, where we're working, the Warriors, the Niners, people love to talk about that. And there just became sort of for me at least, a smaller and smaller outlet for talking about deeper stuff. And that would tend to be what I would talk about with my partner at the time. No other emotional outlet, I think, is really common for men.
Oh my gosh, so common. I see that so much of like where there's even just like kind of sadness quotient sometimes is heavier on the men because they just lost their, like you said, emotional outlet or a place to just be able to kind of like let it all go and put it on the table.
Yeah. And sort of making this assumption almost, not even consciously, but that that's her job, is to hear my emotional state and help me with that because I don't know how to do it on my own. And I judge a lot of men do that, and not consciously, not purposefully. It's sort of just how people are taught and modeled. That's sort of, certainly for my parents, and I think a lot of people's parents, that's just common, sadly common.
Yeah.
And so doing the men's work helped me open up with other men and have that shared language and that ability to just open up a little more, for me, in front of a group, not even just men or women, but just to sit there and talk about what was happening inside. I think it was helpful to do that with men first because
for you, you kind of needed that path.
It felt a little safer at the time, and then I think that helped sit at Noble Man and really dig a little deeper, dig into what was happening with relationship issues, with what my family dynamic looked like growing up, and modeling that and talking about that, just really looking at it, looking in the face, in front of other people. And that's, I think, a huge piece that a lot of, you can do therapy, you can do meditation, you can do a lot of one-on-one or solo stuff. There's some really powerful work you can do with other people. That's my other piece I would pitch for is any transformational change work you want to do, like find a group and get vulnerable. It'll feel like you're tearing your soul apart, but it's better on the other side in any case.
Right. Well, I think that, to kind of speak about that, it's like there is sometimes this ripping off of the Band-Aid feeling when we're doing those things, because we're used to that, right? Like we're used to not being that transparent. We're used to, you just keep stuff to yourself, you deal with it on your own, or there's like maybe one or two trusted people that I can like share with, but that's it. Right. And so then to, like you said, be vulnerable enough to share in front of a group, it's quite transformational. And I will say something about group work for those that have not experienced group work or a weekend or a retreat. As Adam said, it's such a different experience to be put in an immersive situation, right? Where you are now doing exercises and it's very visceral, and there's even a study around experiential learning. So something that like happens at these weekends because you're practicing, you're doing it again and again and again, and you're trying something out, and then you're seeing how it, like the impact of it, and then you might be debriefing, and then you're trying again. And those
muscle memory.
Oh my gosh, and the retention is 80% versus 20% from just learning and listening. So there's just something also in the staying power of the learning that happens when you do it in an experiential group, visceral kind of situation.
Yeah. Another really interesting piece of the core weekend is, so not giving away anything, but you're encouraged to sort of express whatever emotions are coming up.
No, this is good. We can share about this. This is great.
Is that a good segue?
Yes, perfect. Yeah. So what is unique about a core weekend?
Yeah, there's, the nuts and bolts don't add up to overall what the weekend is, right? There's some sort of somatic movement experiences, there's some group sharing, there's small circles, larger circles, there's some practices, there's nothing really does justice to the whole, but there's some overall. I think what you're encouraged over the weekend as a man is to just express whatever is coming up, whether that's sadness, grief, joy, anger. Anger was an interesting one that was welcomed. And as a man, there's not cool to be angry. For me at least, it wouldn't come up until it would boil over, and that's not good. And I would never let it boil over. So it's sort of building and building. And
so you did the thing of suppressing it, where for some men it might be the outburst, but for you it was like the
it would go inwards. And it would come out. I'd play sports, or I'd bike, or physical movement, but it's not really letting whatever is in there really be heard. And so we did some work with anger. And
what was that like, to be able to express that in front of women?
Yeah, it opened something up. It sort of tapped into a really old memory for me of something I hadn't really even thought of, just with a family member and anger at her that I could never really express. That was a really cool piece. I'll take that with me forever, because I was encouraged to let that anger just be heard. I'm going to get feeling emotions. Under that was like a real deep sadness, and I had never really felt that. That was just sitting there for a long, long time, and really powerful just to have access to it, just to know that was in there, and just look at it with a little more love and compassion, and realizing that was a big part of what was just so bound up. So it definitely opened something for me that weekend, just to feel that. And then, that I don't even have great words for it, but by the end, you're sort of in this altered state of just feeling everything. And really, it came down to just feeling connection and love to everybody who was there, more open with people, a little less guarded, for me at least. And so it was just, yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I was just blown open by the last day.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it was one of the scariest things, honestly, that I felt I've ever done. Just sitting and talking for a couple days.
I know. Oh gosh, see,
not
this is
that
when I have
complicated.
so much empathy for our like hearts. Like, it's so scared of something that like we're not going to be eaten by wolves, but it feels like it, man. Like we're
Felt
gonna,
like
I'm
I was
gonna die.
every day, and I was really just gonna talk to other people.
Yeah.
And look inside, and it is scary. Not to downplay it.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard work.
It is hard work.
It's
hard work.
And beautiful and powerful. So
Yeah.
highly recommended.
Yes, and so that's that part of what Adam talked about with the emotions, because the other beautiful thing about this weekend is sometimes we don't know why we do what we do, and it's okay. I don't think you need to know or should know. We're not trained therapists. We're not into, human development. Like, we just know that something might not be working, or just something, I want something different, right? And so to be in a space where you have full permission to look, right? You have full permission to get in there. What's happening? What are you feeling? And just with lots of love and curiosity, just to see what might be there. Because if we don't know the thing that's running the whole show, basically, like you said, like there's a sadness, but I didn't know that there was a sadness because I put this on top of it, and then this, and then this, and then this, and that. I feel like happens a lot of times. Like, we just are trying to protect ourselves from feeling hurt. And so we'll kind of do this, masking thing. It's so human nature. And so to have, and that's why we do these weekends. It's like to give people permission, especially for nobleman men, permission to ask these questions around their relationship with women, whether they're moms or their sisters or their aunts or their colleagues. And whatever the relationship is, it's like you get to have 4 days to look and feel and face and heal it and transform it. And so we're going to get to the good part, don't worry, about like kind of what then happens on the other end when you go through the fire, and on the other side, like, I would love to share just kind of like, what was that like coming out of that? And just where are you sitting now with what you learned?
I think right after for me, it's definitely not a quick fix. It's not you're going to go through this weekend and everything will be healed with your relationships with women. It was hard. It sort of pulled apart some pieces, and maybe the structure overall wasn't that strong, but it was a structure. And once you start pulling it apart,
your structure, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It brings up a lot of questions, and maybe a path to answers. So yeah, it was tough for a couple months. It really led to just a lot of questions, a lot of reflection, a lot of looking inwards, which now I think is good. At the time it was hard, but it opened up a lot. And now that I have almost a year perspective on it, and that's not even that long, right? A year is not a long time in the scheme of things to do some really powerful work. Something else that I did a couple months later is I staffed Radiant Woman.
Okay.
Is that something I can talk about?
Yes.
As something that yeah.
Yes.
So you can't be part of this other experience if you haven't done Nobleman. So it sort of unlocks these other opportunities. And so I staffed the flip side weekend for women called Radiant Woman.
Yes. So women attend and men staff. So women are now doing their work around men with men.
And I remember feeling at the end of Nobleman so grateful for the women holding such a beautiful space. And they were there radiating just unconditional love. That was their job, was just to be unconditional love through our anger, sadness, anything that was happening, any story that they heard was just to, instead of shame us, to just love us. And I was so grateful. I wanted to give back. And so I went and staffed Radiant Woman. And as staff for the man, you're called to be not just unconditional love, but just to be sort of a strong, safe presence in the range of any emotion that the women were expressing. And that was beautiful and really hard and challenging and just such an amazing other thing that I'm so happy that I did that. It added elements to my life and into a new relationship that I have now. Just to be able to be with emotion more instead of trying to shut it down and fix it. And, that's a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah, and I'm curious how you
It's
feel.
not perfect, but
No, well, and yes, let's all disclaimer. Relationships are work and they're amazing. Like it's that thing. I think it's such a beautiful analogy of like this work is work,
yeah.
but when we do the work, what the rewards for it?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are the rewards you get to experience in your relationship because you and his partner has also done the work, and so
the rewards.
like what's different that you can attribute to the fact that you two are committed to the work?
I think we have a lot better language than I've ever had, at least, to talk through the things that just come up in relationships and the projections and the triggers and everything that will come up in relationships because we were only taught one model of relationships. Nobody's taught as a kid that the way their parents did it might not be the perfect way. It's just one way. And yeah, so just having sort of a shared language and a shared willingness to really work on some of the tough spots. And I think clarity on what's healthy and what's not healthy, and being able to talk about that, and being able to share a vision of what I want, which I don't know if I ever really had.
Wow, the vision piece?
Yeah, of what a healthy relationship was for me, not just generally, because they're different for everyone.
Yes, yeah. And I know something that you and Britt mentioned is that you've been also doing therapy proactively.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to just, again, this is because the work comes in many forms, and how beautiful to have that like supplemented and complemented, right? Like group work and then one-on-one work and then couples work.
A couple months ago we sought out and things were going great. Not perfect, but great. And we were like, what else can we do to be better, to sort of almost hit the gym and challenge ourselves a little more now when we're in a good place and resourced and just feeling strong and excited to help us in those times of challenge and find another resource. And that was hard. It's not easy to do couples counseling, coaching, any of that, because it brings up a lot of old stuff. Not stuff that your partner ever did, but stuff from your life. And you realize how much is packed in there that just has nothing to do with them. It's all really your own stuff. So we're both working on bringing not just the best versions of ourselves, but trying to make the relationship this kind of other entity that we're creating the strongest that it can be.
Yeah.
And never, 2 years ago, if you'd said that I would have voluntarily said, let's go check out some couples counseling, that wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I love it. Like it's beautiful work. It brings us closer. It's challenging and it's so rewarding.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And actually, thank you for talking about the reality, which is anytime we're doing inquiry work, we're gonna find things, and sometimes those things aren't things we want to see, which probably is the reason you didn't do the digging in the first place.
It's painful.
It's painful.
It brings up the hard stuff.
It does. And as someone that also has gone through a lot, like in my childhood and my life, and every time I think the same thing, like, really, I really need to look at this again, or just or again,
just like, fix this?
Exactly. Like, why do I feel like I keep hitting my head against the wall? But every time it gets easier, or every time we become more facile, like you said, we're in the gym, we're training, we're doing that kind of work, and we get stronger. Because now that I can definitely attest that since I've been with Core for 5 years, and every time I go back and staff, or every time I'm attending a workshop, or every time I'm doing the work I'm getting stronger. It's like the window of time between something happening and me being able to react in a healthy, aware way.
Yeah, to tap
versus,
into the healthy self. And
yeah,
that's great work.
yeah,
Finding that healthy self and
right,
literally pulling it out and looking at it.
yeah. So what Adam was talking about is just we use so many different tools at Core and Nobleman, and one of them is just really talking about the distinctions of like the healthy part of us versus the part that got hurt really young, or the part that is um, built up a lot of like defenses and strategies, and like just wanted to keep you like safe. So like these are just some of the cool things that we do at the weekends. Like it really does bring together the psychological piece and, like you said, the somatic, like the body, because we store so much in our bodies. We do a lot of emotional work, and then there's also a very strong component of spirituality in the sense that you get to bring in whatever works for you around. And even if you're an atheist, if that's your thing, then you bring that in, right? Like, but for us to just make sure we're covering all the facets of ourself so that it does create more lasting change, because we're kind of looking at all of them at the same time, and we're integrating them as we're doing the work too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anything else you want to share about before we start to kind of wrap it up? And I got so sucked into our like conversation about it. But yeah, anything you want to basically. What did you wish you knew then that you know now? And what would you share with our lovely gentlemen viewers about this journey in Core?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that I wish I'd known. It's like the knowledge doesn't really
happen until that's a good point. You're like, this wasn't helping me at that time.
This
good point.
Far many places, but
and you should know you're a lawyer. Like you did a lot of working on
this for a long. Tool.
It is. It is a tool.
Mm-hmm. Important part of life, but not the only tool. It's not good with every kind of problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying not to beat myself up and say I wish I'd started looking inward sooner, because I'm here and it's fine. But just sort of looking inwards, and taking that time to really dive in. It brings up some amazing stuff. Hard stuff on the other side is some amazing rewards for sure. Mm-hmm. So, and then there was another piece when I went and staffed Nobleman this year was beautiful, just to witness. Seeing other people do their work can be almost just as potent, because you're always learning lessons from other people. And just being in that field of people who are really just experiencing deeply, you learn from that feeling. And so I'm really grateful just to be a part of it this year.
Yeah, wow, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, and so what I want to share as we start to bring this to a close is that, Core does this work because we really believe that we all have this healthy part of us, that knows, that has desires and dreams and may just not know how to get there, and all these like beliefs and patterns and strategies, and, we're very smart. But like you said, unless we've been taught a way that's actually going to get us what we want, like in a really loving, generous, healthy way, we're going to keep spinning our wheels. And so what a beautiful experience for someone to be able to dive in and then course correct.
Yeah.
And then do it and do it with lots of love and care and patience. And so our Nobleman Weekend, we have one coming up. We would love for you to join. It's like Adam said, it's
treat yourself.
Yes, it's an opportunity. Like it really is an opportunity, and it is hard to describe what happens because it is so unique to that group of men. Even like there's just something about that group of men that comes together where it creates something really cool and special and unique. And that group of staff women that come and those leaders, So even though it's the same weekend, it's going to be your weekend, and it's going to be whatever you bring to it.
Yeah.
And you're going to get that, and I swear 10 times more that you probably don't even know about. And so join us. We have our next one March 5th through the 8th, and early bird goes on until January 23rd. So on Thursday, you have an opportunity to save another $500 off. And it's like all included, y'all. Like, pamper yourself. Like, men, I feel like pampering is not a thing, and but this is like a ladies' retreat.
You are held in a lovely field. The food is delicious. The place is wonderful. And
you just have to get yourself there, like pay for the thing, get yourself there, and then we take care of the rest. We feed you, you have a place to stay, everything is taken care of, and you get to come out of it with a much more aware sense of self. And to me, I see confidence, power, open-heartedness, and just so much more from the men.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, please send us a message. You can go to coreexperience.com to learn more about Core. Hit Nobleman, and you will learn all about our intro workshop for men, led and staffed by women. So thank you again for joining us, and we shall see you soon.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yay! Bye, guys!